Welcome to Living from the Heart. I am your host, Tina Thrussell, co-founder of Best You Can Be and messenger of the Shin Dao, the way of the heart. Well, it's taken us 17 minutes, but we finally are able to go live. And in just a moment, I'm going to bring Stephen Garrett on screen. I first met Stephen something like 15 years ago, and in the 15 years I've known him, I have watched him dedicate his life to improving people's quality of life. And I was a participant in several programs that he facilitated. We've been on a spiritual path for many, many years. And I don't know if I'll call it newest and latest passion, but it's certainly his newest focus, at least from the perspective of the 15 years that I've known him, has been on bringing dignity to death and making it an accepted part of living. And I am thrilled to be able to bring Stephen on to the show and talk about this much needed topic. And just before I bring him on the screen, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that there's a little crawler at the bottom that says you can subscribe to receive Heart and Mind Matters, which is an inspirational e-zine that goes out every other Tuesday morning. You can receive that complimentary by logging in at bestyoucanbe.ca, B-E-S-T, the letter U.ca. And now, without further ado, you've waited long enough. Here he is, Stephen Garrett. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi.
Hi.
This was lots of fun, you and I getting this show up and running, eh?
It was a little bit challenging, but here we are at long last.
And we have something in common. I see snow in the background behind you, and we've got a ton of snow here in Maple Ridge, BC.
Oh, yeah, which is not that common for you, is it?
Very uncommon.
Yeah. Well, we're in this real deep freeze too. It's 30, more than 30 degrees below 0 Celsius here. And yeah, I'm bundled up, as you can see, and just doing our best to stay warm on these frigid days.
Absolutely. So good to
And
see you, Tina.
a great way to stay warm is to have great conversation with people that we love. So thank you for being here. And thanks for putting up with all those technology issues.
My pleasure entirely.
Hmm. So how did focusing on death become a passion for you?
Well, it's a long story, Tina, but I'll give you and your listeners the abridged version. Back in May of 1988, it was a Thursday night. About 6:32, my sister passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. And she was 36, I was 38. And it just was shocking to me.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand it. It made no sense to me. I was angry at God. I was just like, what? And so, as I was lowering her body into the grave in her casket, I was one of her six pallbearers. I made a commitment that I was going to discover what was really going on here on planet Earth, because whatever's going on doesn't make sense this way. And that got me launched into my spiritual path. And I began seeking God and seeking the truth and seeking the divine or seeking the one or whatever it was. I was seeking something that could help me make sense of it. And so I followed that path, and it took me to, Warrior Sage and meeting you and Neil and a whole bunch of other people. And that path took me into this whole room of being fascinated in a way by death and dying and how our crazy North American culture doesn't do it very well.
Hmm. That's for sure.
Yeah, we've actually made it an enemy. And if you look at the brand of the Grim Reaper, it's understandable. And so I was caught by, why does our North American culture do it so badly? And why do cultures like the Maori or the Hindi in India do it so well? And I just kept on following my nose and following my heart, and in a way, following the creator's encouragement to step into this ring of death and dying, and to help us here in North America learn to do it better or remember to do it better.
That's really amazing. You mentioned how the Indians in India do it so well. And I remember my first experience in India. I was traveling there on my own. I met this woman from Holland who'd been traveling to India every year to stay with friends since 1963. And this was like back in the early 2000s. And we were walking along the Ghat in Varanasi,
Yes.
you know, the beautiful place where they take the bodies down to the river to be burned to end the cycle of reincarnation. And we came across this bald fellow. Yeah, no surprise, there's a lot of bald fellows in India, but we came across this bald fellow, and she said, oh, whatever his name was, and how is Papa? And he said, oh, Papa expired. And she said, oh, I see. And she said, and so you have shaved your head in his honor? Yes, absolutely. And and then conversation just carried on. It was just, this is the way it is. It's part of life. He was here. His time has expired. He's moved on. We move on.
That's right. I've been to the very gas you were at several times, and had very similar experiences, and my heart was warmed by the. It's not matter of factness, but it's just like this is life,
Mhm.
you know. And yeah, we're sad that Papa's gone,
Yeah,
but we knew him,
yeah.
and so it's more embraced as just a natural, important facet of life that actually, if we look at it closely, would inspire our own living more deeply.
When you say that, that reminds me, your book immediately comes to mind, When Death Speaks, right? That whole book was inspired by that. Let's look at death as a way to inspire us to live more fully.
Yeah. And the more I'm hanging around death and dying and grief and loss, the more I'm seeing that idea of mine is true. If we really get that we have a best by date, and we all do, um, it might encourage us to live a bit more fully. You know, when my brother Peter passed away back in September of 2015, he'd done an awful lot of chemotherapy, an awful lot of radiation. He threw the medical model at his cancer with a real zeal, and I understand it. He wanted to live, you know. But I couldn't understand in my brain why so much chemo, why so much radiation. Like, what were you thinking? You know, that stuff maybe killed you quicker than the cancer would have.
Yeah.
And so he had a couple of weeks to live. I dashed my butt up to Creston, BC, and sat with him in the butterfly room at the Creston General Hospital where he was in palliative care. One day, about 2 days before he passed, there was nobody else in the room. And brother to brother, I had this nagging question that I had to ask him for both our sakes. And I said to Peter, I don't get it. Why so much chemo? Why so much radiation? Why? And he got the question. He got what I was asking. And I could see him pondering whether he should tell the truth or just give me a story.
Mm.
He decided to tell me the truth. And it was really heart rendering. He said, Stephen, I'm 61 years old. I always held back in my life. I never lived as fully
Mm.
as I knew I could in my heart. I just wanted 5 more years so I could live my ass off,
Oh,
you know? And so there's nothing to say. There's nothing to do. So I just said thank you. And I hopped up in his bed with him, and we just held each other and cried
mm.
because it was a very sad deathbed regret to hear from a loved one. And so Peter died 2 days later, but I'm still here. So for Peter, yes, it was absolutely a deathbed regret. But
Yeah.
for me, it was a life lesson. And my life was enriched by my brother's honest, authentic, heart wrenching share. Because when I looked at him and felt his agony is not quite the right word, but felt his despair
Mm.
about having held back in life, it's like, I'm not going out like that.
Yeah.
I refuse. And so, though I miss my brother deeply and miss getting my ass kicked at cribbage by him, I'm inspired by his death because he left me a very generous, wise lesson. And so when I look at my own life, Tina, this is what I've noticed is if I let the death affect me and allow the grief to kind of shake me up, and then I look for the wisdom or the gift that my loved one has left behind and find it, because it's always there, I can live from that gift more fully and honor the life of my loved one by doing just that.
Absolutely. Stephen, I hate to interrupt you. Sandy's online with us and she says she can't hear you very well. So I'm not sure if you're able to be a little closer to the mic or speak just a little more loudly. I'm not sure. She also
Oh,
said death is embraced as a facet of life and love and a beautiful and comforting perspective. She
yes.
appreciates that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm on this bit of a mission, Tina, if I may. Uh, I'm not a big fan of the Grim Reaper brand at all. And so we're rebranding death. And the image I have of death is that it should be actually an inspiring teacher.
Mm,
And that if we were to change our picture that we look at to something like maybe Neil instead of the Grim Reaper, that what we see immediately affects our emotionality and
yeah.
immediately triggers all these responses and reactions and reactivity. So
Yeah.
if we change the brand and look at death as something else, change the image, perhaps our emotional response won't be quite so fearful, quite so negative, and quite so reactive.
I love that. What a great idea. Rebrand death. Yeah, the Grim Reaper should be a wise one. You're right.
Yeah.
There's lots to learn from that process.
And if you look at the image of the Grim Reaper and just take away the darkness and the fear and the weapon and the bones, you'll notice that the Grim Reaper is hooded like a monk.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what I want to take away from the old brand is, oh, it's spiritual, there's wisdom, there's monkishness there. How do we place it in our culture in a way that our people can see it and be uplifted and inspired, even though on a human level they may be sad and grief stricken?
Wow, I just had this visual as you were describing that of maintaining the monk's robe because there is that. And instead of we see bones underneath, what we see is shining light. And instead of that sickle or scythe, whatever you call it, it's a staff, you know? It just, yeah, there it is, the bearer of wisdom rather than,
Totally.
yeah,
And when I left my brother's room at the Crescent Hospital, I was reminded of William Shakespeare, and I didn't like him much when I was in high school. But as I kissed my brother on the forehead for the last time, I just put a kiss right here, and then I turned to walk away. I was overcome first by joy,
mm,
and there was this joyfulness or this sweetness in our parting. I knew him. His suffering was over. Our family's suffering was over. And there was a sweetness about it
yeah,
right beside the sorrow that was there on the human level. And I thought, oh, that William Shakespeare guy, he knew what he was talking about because he said it. Parting is such sweet sorrow. And he
so,
said sweet first.
yeah, yeah,
And
so true.
yeah, that was my personal experience as I turned away from my brother for the last time.
Mm. Yeah, I had the same kind of experience. I was there with my father when he took his last breath. I was holding his hand. Um, my um, my stepmother, his second wife, and I, we had our arms around each other. I had one hand, she had Dad's other hand, so we were this beautiful little triad. And he took his last breath, and we looked at each other, and I said, "Wow, did that just happen?" She's like, "Yep." And there was this sense of relief that his suffering is over, our suffering is now over, now we can move on with life, and that And there were some amazing things that happened before that. He had been in a coma. And when I was holding his hand and saying, you know, Dad, I'm here and you've been suffering a long time. And maybe you're hanging on because you're afraid to go because you're worried that nobody's going to take care of Mom. But don't worry. She's taken care of. We're here from her. If you want to go now, it's okay. And honest to God, Stephen, he opened his eyes and he looked at me. He'd been in a coma for 2 days. He looked at me and for a second, he looked confused. But then there was this clarity, and it was like he was seeing my soul and I was seeing his.
Yeah.
And I said, Mom, come here, come here, come here. So she came over and she looked at him, and I said, I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes together. So I, stepped into the washroom. I came back. She's like, okay, you better get over here. She could sense it was time. He was coming. And then he looked up and his eyes were tracking, like he was watching. And I was so certain that it was his mother and his brother who had come to guide him in that passage. I just, there was this knowing inside. And to watch that, and then he looked at us like, are you sure it's okay? And we're like, yes, it's okay. You can go with them now,
Yeah.
And then he took that last breath and he was gone. And yeah, I understand the joy that you're talking about and the sorrow all together. But yeah,
Yeah.
incredible.
It's very rich and very full and very intimate,
Yes.
and not unlike birth. We used to medicalize birth until the birth doulas came back and
Yeah.
wrested it from the medical model. Well, perhaps we're doing the same with death, because I know that the medical model considers death a failure.
Hmm.
And so they fight death at all costs and sometimes prolong life way past the best by date.
Yeah.
That, that does cause extra grief and upset for the family and for the one dying.
Yeah.
And, your story, Tina, reminds me of our enlightenment intensives we used to do.
Yeah.
Tell me who you are.
Yeah.
And in a way, at the moment of death, our loved one is showing us who they are if we pay attention. If we watch, if we listen, if we use our senses, we'll feel them. And
Yeah.
it won't be just their body that we're feeling, it's
No.
them. You said it. You said your soul was talking to your dad's soul.
Yeah.
This is something I encourage people to do. Your loved one may be absolutely, apparently unconscious and uncommunicative, but the one they are, their essence, their divinity, their spirit, their soul, their oneness, their whatever you want to call it, that's there for sure. And if that piece of you can talk to that piece in them, they'll hear you.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've experienced it. I know it's true.
Yeah.
And we're wowing that Patricia and Sandy are commenting here in the side. It's just such wise words. Wow, they're loving this message
Yeah.
for sure.
And if we can get beyond that Judeo Christian image of the Grim Reaper and invite death back into human life where it rightfully belongs as a counterbalance. I mean, we're on a bipolar planet, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
You've got to have life and death side by side.
Yeah.
And if they are, our lives will blossom even more fully. My boys, I have in my office what I call my death binder. And all it is a collection of my end of life paperwork.
Mm.
I've got my will, I've got my advanced care directives, I've got my funeral arrangements. Everything that's pertinent to the end of my life is in this binder. So I had my boys over, and Snora and I and Benny and Ollie sat down, and we had this initially uncomfortable moment where the boys saw the death binder on the dining room table, along with a bunch of pizza and a couple of beer. And Ollie said, Dad, what's a death binder? And so I said, honey, just have a beer and some pizza. We'll get to the binder in a minute. And then the four of us, walked through the contents of the binder. We walked through what each tab meant and what was contained there. And the reason I did it was because when my dad passed, we hadn't done that as a family.
Mm.
And the doctor said to me and my mother, my dad's plugged into a machine. He says, "So, what do you think we should do?" And I said, "About what?" He said, "About your father." I said, "Well, you're the doctor." He said, "Well, you've got to make a choice.
Mm.
Do you unplug him or don't you?" And for me, the eldest son of my mom, we'd not had that conversation with dad. So we had to kind of guess.
Yeah.
And I think we guessed right because, he couldn't play cribbage anymore. His friends would come by the hospital room and stay for 13 seconds.
Mm.
He couldn't have a rum and coke. He couldn't go golfing, So mom and I said, I think it's time. But there was that little niggle of, are we sure, So
Yeah.
with my boys, I didn't want them to feel that unnecessary intensity. And I want them to know exactly what I want and what I don't want. And so they're clear. That the last section of it is there's a life insurance policy that will pay for a plane ticket for Oliver and Ben and Sonora, who's much younger than me, to fly to Varanasi, India,
Oh,
and toss my ashes in the Ganga.
oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful.
And so Oliver and Ben heard this, and all I said, "We get a trip to India, Dad? When are you dying?" So it lightened the conversation up a little bit. But interestingly, since that day, I get a few more texts from Ollie and Ben on a regular basis. I get a few more invites over to play cards or to watch a movie or a hockey game than we used to. Because I think the boys recognize they haven't got me forever, and I haven't got them forever. So let's make sure that the time that we have, we spend well together.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So this is why I'm so committed to rebranding Deaf and Dying, and why I'm so intentional around letting people know it's okay to have death in your family. It'll actually enliven your entire clan.
Yes. And you'll be encouraged to hear this. We had a conversations night in December, and the topic chosen by a young lady, like a woman in her maybe late 20s, very early 30s, if that, who's a nurse in geriatric care, and suggested that we have a conversation night based around dying with dignity. And what she brought up was exactly what you said. Please make sure you have all your paperwork arranged. Talk to your family. Let them know what your wishes are, no matter what age you are, because you never know. I mean, you could walk across the street, get hit by a bus, and be done.
Yep.
You never know. So get to this. Talk to people. Let's stop hiding death behind a door. And here is a very young person saying this, and it was so encouraging.
Yep.
And I thought, I have to let you know this because this is important.
Yeah. It's
Just,
great. And if we can get people to do their end of life paperwork well in advance, to create a just in case binder or an all ready to go binder, a death binder, whatever you want to call it, and then have that conversation meaningfully and heart to heart with your loved ones, it will uplift your life because you will get, wow, I am impermanent and I do have a best by date, and so does everybody else in my darn family.
yeah.
And because I've been doing some studying recently around impermanence, which is death. And I'm noticing, okay, it was a great fall, but fall died, and now we got damn snow on the ground. Well, soon the snow will melt because it too is impermanent, and we'll have tulips coming up. And and you just start to notice everything. Even the mood I'm in is 100% impermanent. And the more I can embrace that impermanence, the more I can be in the current moment and live
Mm.
it more fully. I tend not to go back in history too far forward into the future because I just don't know. And it's not morbid at all. I'm not being morbid about it. I
No,
just don't know.
it's true. And the minute you said that everything is impermanence, I kind of went, whoa, yeah, I never really consciously thought about how everything, yeah, even the sea, everything is impermanent, the seasons, everything. And there was a lightness. I experienced a lightness at that recognition and that revelation.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm praying that those watching this and listening will also get to experience that. There is a sense of lightness and knowing.
Because if everything is impermanent, that means the good, the bad, and the ugly is all impermanent.
Exactly.
And then there's just me. Like for me, this is like the ultimate enlightenment intensive
Yeah.
because it keeps on driving me into the only place, which is me. That's the only permanence I've got is this essence or this life force or this divinity or this whatever you want to call it. That's all that's permanent. And even in that, it's not so permanent because I keep on showing up in different bodies.
Exactly. And every time is a different experience. You've added, you're wiser, you've learned more, whatever, right? So yes, yeah, true. Even the very, very core of who you are is kind of impermanent in that it will be a new and improved version 5 minutes from now.
Absolutely. And you know what I'd encourage us all to do is notice in our daily life how everything is in fact impermanent. Like this show that we're doing, it was conceived. It was an idea. And then we did some stuff and did some more stuff and then it happened. So it's now living. But at one point it'll die.
Yeah.
And if you start to notice that, it starts to come home here pretty quick. It's like, ooh, that's why we push back and push it away because we don't want to deal with our own personal impermanence.
Mm, yeah.
You know, that's
Yeah.
why people push away from the deathbed because the moment you walk into the room, yeah, you know, my brother was dying, but that put in front of my face, right in the tip of my nose, my own mortality. If I'm unwilling to face that, I'm going to do something in the room to get out of there.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get away from my own mortality and my own impermanence, but I'm making it about my brother needs some peace and quiet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a great practice and it's a very enlivening practice. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sandy's reiterating, oh, Deathbinder, really interesting. Yep. Liking that idea too, right?
What I'll do, Tina, is I'll send you over a file via email of the all ready to go binder.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, so you can see it, Neil can see it, and any of your listeners, just share it with them. It's a really good piece of work, and it helps us get all ready to go. And more importantly, it helps us have those very important conversations with our family around our own impermanence.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. So, what an incredible gift for you to share that with us. So, is it something that you've created and it can be a PDF that people could just grab? Like if we actually put it right under the show posting,
Yep,
here's the, could we do that?
yep. I'll PDF it today, and
Excellent.
I'll get it off to you as soon as I can.
Oh, that's great. That would be fabulous. What a gift to everyone. Now, before we do that, I should ask this question. Have you got a website that's focused on this new work that you're doing?
Yes, I do. It's called aliveindeath.com, and I'm in the midst of uh, renovating it. Uh, I'm also on a mission to help families prepare for more home deaths. Given my generation is heading for the exit doors in massive numbers, we're going to swamp our healthcare systems and our death care systems, and home deaths will become way, way, way more common.
Oh, that's
So
good news.
yeah, and so I'm creating a piece of my training program all about how would we do that.
Mm.
How do we take care of the primary caregiver? How would we take care of the home? What equipment would we need? What support do we need from our neighborhood and our community members? Is our neighborhood death friendly? So over time, over the next 3 months, that site's going to be changing significantly, but it has the same brand, the same theme. It's let's enlighten people around death and dying and grief and loss and living more passionately.
Yeah. Okay. So I've put your website on the screen here. Have I got that right? Aliveindeath.com.
That is correct.
Okay, good. Now it just occurred to me, why don't you put that PDF there on that website? And then when I send people to your website to download the Death Binder, they get to see all the other work and all the other information that's there.
That's great. That's a good idea.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
Awesome.
do that. As I so admire what you're doing here. There are so few people who are willing to grab this topic and run with it and make it the important thing that it is, to bring it to our awareness and make it more friendly and not something to be scared of, but something to embrace and accept. Yeah. Ah, I can't believe, yeah, even with our late start, we're actually over a half an hour of actual airtime. So, as you say, everything has life and everything has death. It's time to bring death to the show. I can't say thank you enough for sharing this conversation, for agreeing to put that PDF with all of that, preparing for the time information there so that our viewers can grab that and see what else is coming up. I just have to make this comment again. My own mother-in-law, more than 17 years ago, made the decision to look death in the face. She was in renal failure. She was on kidney dialysis. One day she just said, "No, this is enough. I'm done with this. I'm not going to take the dialysis. Take me home." And so those of us who were able to, we took time off work. We went and we stayed at home with her, and we just got the most out of those last days with her.
Yep.
And exactly what you said happened. I, after that, looked at the gift of, how do I examine my own life? How do I get more out of my life? How do I get to the point where I don't want to pull that plug? Because even though my life has changed from what it was, it's still full and has lots in it. So it was quite a gift that she gave me
Yep.
from that.
This is the thing I try and teach families at the right time. Sometimes it's not the right time to have them look for the gift,
Hmm.
but it's always there.
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely is. What beautiful parting thought. Is there actually any other thing you want to share? Last final words for our viewers.
Not really. Just let's just get over the best by date and get on with living our life as fully as we can. We've got one shot at it in this body. We may have multiple shots at it in other bodies. We got one in this body. Let's just get the fact that one day we're not going to be here, and let's live our ass off in the name of my dear brother Peter.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stephen. Oh, big love for you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
My pleasure.
And I will remind everyone at the bottom of the post to check out aliveindeath.com and watch for that PDF.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen.
Till next time.
Ciao for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, the broadcast simply just won't end. Here I am clicking stop, stop, and it's not stopping. There must be a final message. The final message is, live life to the fullest. Live from your heart. Live the Shin Dao, the way of the heart.